Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with artist Dianne Athey, whose work invites viewers into a world shaped by observation, intuition, and a deeply personal visual language. In this interview, we'll talk with her about the ideas that spark her work, the process behind her paintings, and the experiences that continue to shape her artistic journey. Welcome, Dianne. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm pleased to be here.
Great. Your work often feels deeply connected to observation and experience. What first draws you to a subject, and how do you decide that it deserves to become a painting?
Okay, interesting. My first love of painting was portraiture, and I did paint for 12 years at the Art Students League from life and took many workshops with some of my hero painters. When I got my painting studio, I didn't have the models anymore, and so I found my subject matter in sea glass as a series that I could start, and it attracted me tremendously because of the graphic shapes and colors and textures that sea glass has. So it was born out of necessity that I changed to sea glass at that time.
Um, so artists develop a visual language over time. Were there pivotal moments that changed the way that you approached your work, that how you went from sea glass to the trapeze paintings?
Well, I usually have some kind of a bee in my bonnet, on the in the back burner that I can't ignore, and I will try to ignore it for years, and it'll keep bubbling up. And that's what happened with the trapeze painting. Um, I had a trapeze when I was a kid. I was passionate about it, and it was an experience that my father built in my backyard, and it just never went away. So I thought, I have to, I have to paint this. I didn't have a choice, and it was very well received, and so it turned into a series, and happily, thank you. I love it.
Well, that's yeah, process is often invisible to the viewer. So, can you walk us through how, once you have the subject matter, how the piece begins for you, and then what happens in the studio as it develops?
Okay, I have to make a lot of decisions all the time, and I change everything ongoingly. It's a process where I build up the canvas from a toned canvas and an underpainting, and it's never done until it's done. So I may have an area that just bothers me, and I don't know why. I think it's done, but it's not done until I don't have that bothersome feeling going on. Um, but I love the process, and it's hard for me to describe, but it's a path. It's an experience, a flow.
So, along those lines, many viewers connect emotionally with art in different ways. When someone encounters your work for the first time, what kind of experience or feeling do you hope it might spark?
I hope it sparks a personal feeling that will dwell within someone on any level that they can connect to the painting through, be it an experience that they've had themselves that comes through the painting for them, like the sea glass. I often get comments that it reminds people of a certain time on a beach with their mother, or s- just the prize of finding a gem on the sand. To people that have had backgrounds in gymnastics and trapeze and have that experience. I had a woman who moved across the country and promised herself that if she got that job, she would buy my trapeze painting because she couldn't get it out of her mind. And it was the faith leading her on in the trapeze painting. And that's similar to what I'm trying to depict, is that moment in time where uh, it's very ephemeral and fleeting, but successful.
Well, looking where you are now in your artistic journey, what ideas, themes, or directions are you most excited to explore in your future work?
I'm not done painting sea glass, but I have moved on to an Aikido series of couples in battle. And also, I'm still painting the physical couples engaged with each other in a acrobatic fashion. And I'm very compelled by both of these series. And what I see is it's about relationship and physicality and the beauty of shapes. So I'm excited to present my new series soon.
And in that, I can't wait to see it. So thank you so much for giving us your time and telling us about your work. And we'll look for your work as soon as we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm here with Jeff Sugar, one of the artists represented by ArtRep-DG. Jeff is actually a sculptor. He makes mobiles, and he is a psychiatrist and has had an illustrious career in medicine. And now he's working as a professional artist. So welcome, Jeff. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
So I'd like to know what first drew you to creating the mobiles.
The mobiles came when I got tired of drawing the Flintstones, and I heard about Alexander Calder and the fact that he made visual art that was different every time it spun around. And there was something about that that I found very intriguing, and I decided to try it for myself. So I made one out of cardboard that had multiple different hand signals on it, and I entered it into a high school, junior high contest, and then it was it was stolen, which was unusual. And after that, I made a different one that was very abstract. It was a man falling with a parachute with one arm in
So,
negative space.
so let me ask you this. It sounds like you've been making mobiles for a long time. How has your approach evolved over time?
The biggest change I'd say in my mobiles has been moving from pure metal, on which I tried to emphasize by sanding in different directions on each side, the different sides, the light on the different sides. And that worked, but it worked only if it was in the right domain of light. So if it was too dark or too bright, it didn't work very well. So finally, I agreed with some others that I should make colored mobiles, and I've made five of them in the last I don't know, couple of months. It's been a bit of a hectic rate, but I'm happy with how they turned out. They don't need a particular lighting level as much as just having a little bit of breeze that can spin them around.
How does movement inspire or inform your designs?
When I make, often I make a sketch. When I do the sketches, I think about how it will look with each piece spinning around. Sometimes I just uh, start drawing right onto the metal and hope that there's something I can do that will make it work. I'd say maybe 90% to 95% of the time, they work when I hold them up and they spin around. Occasionally they don't, and then that's just a lesson learned.
I like hearing about the process that you use, but but does lighting, architecture, airflow, and then again materials play a major role in creating your mobiles, or does one of them take preference over the other?
I'd say that the condition that's the most important is to have at least a little bit of breeze, or they're most of them are accessible enough that they could be touched and spun around, and then they kind of take off on their own.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us about your work, that you want us to know about your work?
I intentionally have avoided working in the way that Calder did. He was great. I still enjoy seeing his work. I've tried to take it to a different direction using figurative mobiles, making figurative mobiles, and also at the same time abstract mobiles.
Jeff, thank you so much for spending time with us and letting us know about your work. And like I say, I look forward to seeing more of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're here today with Diane Schroeder, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Diane. Um, your work invites viewers into a very thoughtful and engaging visual conversation, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. So welcome. Always nice to see you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep, my pleasure. Your work often carries a strong sense of mood and atmosphere. When you begin a piece, are you guided more by an emotional idea, a visual image, or the materials themselves?
Well, I have to say it's all three of those. It's emotional. The materials I use are very influential in what the piece is going to be, and the visual is often a surprise of what's going to come.
Many artists develop a visual language over time. What elements in your work do you feel have become most characteristic of your style?
Well, I have to say that I use a lot of metallics, paint that has a metallic feel to it, like a silver paint or a gold paint or iridescent paints that create some motion in the actual paint itself. It takes on a characteristic of reflection of light, and that is most characteristic in my work. And I think that also the contrast of matte materials like rice paper, tissue paper, ribbons, all kinds of found things are also influential in my work.
That leads to my next question. What kinds of influences or life moments most often find their way into your work?
Well, as you know, I live about 100 yards from Lake Michigan. So there's constant motion in the atmosphere. The clouds are always different, the light is always different, and it reflects into the water that is a different color every day. For the 20 years that I've lived here, I have no two colors alike. So I try to use that as an influence, as well as the rocky shoreline that contrasts with all of that, and the park and so forth. What I most often try to do is get a sense of motion in my paintings. So if you were to look at my paintings as just a snapshot in a photograph, there would be no motion. But as you can experience them in a room, you can walk across from one side to the other as if you're walking in a landscape. And there is a difference in the light and the color and the movement that's happening in those paintings. So that is what I'm trying to create, which is why I use so many metallics.
Yeah, I think it's pretty successful. When viewers encounter your artwork for the first time, what kinds of or reflections do you hope your work might inspire?
Well, I'm hoping that people will get a sense of something that resonates in their own life immediately and draws them in so that they're experiencing the motion and the new um, resonation of what is happening as life goes on. I mean, you're constantly emotionally changing, and these paintings, I think, can be interpreted and reinterpreted and um, become actually a part of one's life as opposed to just a picture on a wall.
I must say they are very easy and lovely to live with. They are just beautiful, and I think you're exactly right what the reaction is. So I'd like to thank you. Your answers were fantastic, and always nice to see you. And keep painting. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Goldstein, and I represent 10 artists on an online gallery. At some point, I realized that two of my artists, Dianne Athey and Jeff Sugar, and we went to school together. And Diane Schroeder, originally from Lincoln, Nebraska, is married to Mitchell Cohn, whom we all also went to school with. It started me thinking about how we all had some similar experiences just growing up in the 60s in Akron, and we went off to have pretty exciting careers in the arts. I wanted to participate in this discussion, so I asked an old friend and someone who knows Akron very well if he would moderate our discussion. Jimmy Carney is a friend, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and retired journalist who worked in radio news and later print journalism, serving as a staff writer at the Akron Beacon Journal for 35 years. An amateur photographer, he graduated from Akron Firestone High School in 1967 and the University of Akron in 1971. He is the father of Black Keys drummer Patrick Carney and the brother of the late musician Ralph Carney. So he will be the moderator for this podcast. He will introduce our artists. If you know ArtRep-DG, you will recognize the artists. Mitchell Cohn will be new as a design project manager, and his wife, Diane Schroeder, will be somewhat of an outlier, but she grew up in the Midwest around the same time and will have much to contribute about being an artist in the Midwest, starting in Lincoln, Nebraska. So without further ado, Jimmy Carney, take it away.
Debbie, thank you. It's so good to see you all here. And it's a really interesting topic. I never left Akron, basically. I mean, I did for a couple of years working in other places, but it's near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate it. I would say we start talking to Debbie first about your own art experience, and then we'll go around the table briefly. Then we'll come back and let me just say this. When you're talking, even though we have your names on here, say your first name first. So people who are listening will know who's talking. Let's start with you, Debbie. Tell us about your art life.
Okay, so I went to The Ohio State University, and pretty much the minute that I completed graduate school, I moved to New York. I had a pretty charmed life in New York working in the art world. I worked at the Kitchen Center for Video, Music, and Dance. I worked with artists, doing all kinds of stuff for them. And then I moved to Los Angeles, where I worked initially at Los Angeles County Museum and then MoCA doing events. So I opened up a couple of buildings. I opened up the Anderson building and MoCA. I was there for the big opening. And then I went to Art Center College of Design, which at that point was the #1 art school in the country. I was the assistant director of admissions. I taught art history. I taught design history. I went on to the world of entertainment, where I was the head of recruitment for DreamWorks. animation, and then we sort of moved to Phoenix, and I was on the boards of the museums, Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, the ASU Museum of Art. And then I decided to open up my own shingle, ArtRep-DG. Now, the thing that's really funny is that through all of this, my parents always used to say, "What are you going to do with art history? How are you going to make money?" And so throughout my career, what I learned is that if you're doing what you love, you're going to do well. And so many people that I met throughout my recruitment years and whatever didn't do what they loved. You know, I would ask kids in high school, how many of you have parents who love what they do? Maybe two people would raise their hands. Um, so, you know, I think having a career in the arts is what we all love. And so that's sort of how we wound up here. I have my online gallery. I represent you guys. I love it. And that's where we are.
Beautiful. We're going to go down to Diane, who's on my screen below Debbie, and then we'll move around the screen. Diane, how about telling us a little bit about your background?
Diane Athey.
Diane Athey. Yes, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Diane.
All
Right,
right,
two of
great.
us.
I've always been an artist, and in Akron, I started painting rocks as a teenager and selling them at far corners at the Summit Mall, at various flea markets, and to friends. Um, from there, I graduated to Halbert's and painted family coat of arms while I was still in Akron, as all the art kids did. And after that, I moved to Kent State University, did my college at Kent State. From there, moved to New York City, and got a job at Bergdorf Goodman. I got this job because I had typing skills, and they wanted a typesetter. And 3 weeks after that, I told them that I was an artist, and they immediately put me right into advertising and pay stubs and advertising design. And my favorite thing about that job was being able to retouch on fashion illustrations that came in that were a little bit wrong. And I was able to work on Kenneth Paul Block illustrations, Esther Larson, Joe Eula, big names. So I was this kid from Ohio that landed at Bergdorf Goodman on the corner of Tiffany's and the Plaza Hotel. So I was in hog heaven, so to speak. I've been in New York ever since, and had a variety of jobs, and freelancing and design and advertising, boutique firms with partners. In 2004, I got a job at Town and Country magazine as the design director. And that was really my heyday. That was the penultimate job for me. So much fun. One of my favorite things was retouching photographs and designing special sections and planning photo shoots. And while I had that job, I started going to the Art Students League in evenings and weekends and painting. So I've always been an artist my whole life. It's served me well. I've always loved what I've done, and that brings me up to date. I'm sitting in my studio in Chelsea, the neighborhood of Chelsea, where 300 galleries have moved in around me. So I'm still in the catbird seat here. So
Terrific. Thank you,
there we
Diane. Mitchell, let's move to you if we can. Tell us a little bit about your art background.
So background in Akron started me at Rankin and went to Litchfield and then Firestone. But along the way, I had really the great encouraging experience of art teachers who took an interest. I'm not quite sure how the magic that happened there, but it included people like Lisa Drawn, Jeannie Mandit, Dennis Chasik rather, And then along the way, met Don Drum as well. And the one thing that I noticed in all of their careers, as Debbie was mentioning, is they really loved what they were doing. They were doing art, and they were also sharing that with their students. I happened to be the lucky one to get some of that attention. Um, but the spin on it was a little different. I had interest in how do you make a living doing this? How do you take in um, sell the ideas of what you're doing to other people so that they would have encouragement as well. A counselor at Firestone introduced me to the idea of a competition called Body by Fisher from General Motors, which I entered, which was styling and designing cars, which was of interest at the time, and did not win. But what I did, I in that process was identify a career path and kind of background I'd be looking for if I went on to college to pursue something. And that's when I uncovered industrial design. I'll go fast forward, left Akron, went to Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati in industrial design, which gave me a really diverse background and a cooperative education experience so that I'd be in school and then I would work. So I got professional experiences along the way. When I was done with school, I immediately had opportunities, which is great. That took me on to Chicago. And in Chicago, I worked for several firms. Was recruited to a firm called GHK, which ultimately I took over the leadership of. I'll go fast forward again, merged that firm with another firm called Nelson, and became one of the top 10 firms in the world in terms of scale and opportunities to produce work. A lot about the workplace, so it was about built and branded environments. And whether that's where people work or people live, all of that is better when you have good design. So that's sort of background. The leadership at Nelson and at GHK took me on to start to learn to market, produce the work, and lead teams. And that made us go from a small firm to a global initiative. And we've done work all over the world and had great opportunities, variety of different kinds of cultures and background, always with good design.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mitchell. Jeff Sugar, let's talk about your fascinating background as well. I love the fact that you went do art, but you're a psychiatrist on the side, sort of. Tell us all about what you're doing.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I have a day job, or had a day job as a child and adult psychiatrist. Now I do expert witness work for children and adults specializing in trauma. You know, I had a different view of Akron. It was not pleasant for me in the yeah, let's say all of it. But I interestingly, at this point in my life, I have some very close friends from Akron, and including a friend Jim, who we met each other when we were 4 years old. What what was so when I was a little kid, I started drawing. I remember I drew pictures of the Flintstones when I was about 4, and my family said, "Wow, that's pretty cool." So I like to do that, and even in elementary school, I would get kind of bored. So many of the teachers would let me draw and do things to make cartoons and put them up on the bulletin board. So I like that. But then there were complicating things which I won't get into. I thought maybe I'd want to have an art career, and I did do some painting at the Akron Art Institute, and I would stay even in high school. I would stay up very late painting with acrylics, and I made a bunch of collages that unfortunately I put in a shed, and my mother threw them all out at some point. But I then I went to New College in Sarasota, Florida, And sadly, New College is nothing like what it used to be because of the good graces of Governor DeSantis, but I won't get into those politics. But it was a really great time to be there. Uh, we had a lot of individual work. We could do kind of whatever we wanted as long as it made sense. And at New College, there were a lot of artsy kids, as there still are now. But there were only two art teachers, and the two-dimensional art teacher, meaning she was made out of cardboard, um, she seemed to be pretty good, but she had favorites, and she was a little annoying to work with, and she insisted on doing a certain kind of contour drawing. And then the three-dimensional artist, who was three-dimensional, uh, he would make these large sculptures with some of the other kids, and to be honest, I never thought the sculptures were that good. So uh, as I matured a little bit, I thought, well, and maybe this, as I look back, I'm not sure that, well, who knows? You can never tell what's going to happen. But I thought, who really, sees art? Well, the people who have the luxury of being able to go to museums and who owns it are people who are incredibly wealthy for the really great stuff. And what does that do to the world? And I thought, well, there's a lot of people who have problems in their lives. And I thought that would be sort of a more useful thing to do with whatever skills I had. But I took a 3-year break between college and medical school to really make sure that that was what I wanted. And I was considering psychology or psychiatry, and I spoke to a couple of psychologists who said, no, you should go to medical school because it's just a better career. And I did that. It was challenging because it was really tedious. I knew that I wanted to be a psychiatrist from the very beginning, and I kept up with my artwork, but I would draw pictures all the time. I would sit in classes, and we were expected to be sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day. I would do a lot of drawing, and I made a set of cartoons based on I think worms. It was kind of fun. Me and another friend and I would kind of challenge each other to make these little jokes, and then so I did that, and I really enjoyed working with kids. So I became a child psychiatrist. And all the time, I was really more interested in how interpersonal relationships, not necessarily psychoanalytic, but talking, if it could work, would be a lot better than giving people medication. I was an anti-psychiatrist before I was a psychiatrist. That was R.D. Laing and Thomas Szasz. And I think they made a good contribution. But when I started my, after medical school, when I actually was face to face with patients, I understood that for people with serious pathology like schizophrenia, you can't really have a conversation with them and get anywhere. Medications did work. I mean, they have serious side effects, but they work. But then all through that time, I was still drawing. I just did it kind of compulsively. Well, I wouldn't say compulsively. I would do it whenever I had a chance. And I remember one time I was at a conference, a book conference, because I was at that point I was on the faculty at USC, and someone walked over to me and she saw that I was drawing while the book club, the book show was on. And she looked at me and she said, "How much time do you have to practice your art?" And so I thought, yeah, you're right. I really hadn't given it much time. So to cut to the chase a little bit, I had a pretty long career in psychiatry. I still have it, but I'm just spending about a day a week on it, maybe not even that. And I had an idea a long time ago that I wanted to do some kind of collage work with little bottles that could be turned around. So I did. I made some collages, and then I was thinking about doing something else, something different. So I went into the Otis Institute of Art has like a beginning of the semester, and you can do extension work at wherever you want. So I came to see if someone else had a good idea for me, and this is kind of a little bit funny. There was an older woman who claimed that she was instrumental in the careers of Ed Ruscha and another very well-known artist. And she had published a book called How to Get Hung, with double entendre, definitely part of her shtick. And I showed her an image of a mobile that I'd made when I was 14. It was a little parachute man, and I have it on my website. And that was the first piece that I ever made that had negative space as it was featured. So she looked at me and she said, those young people these days, they don't have any chandeliers. I'm thinking, what the fuck, chandeliers? Who needs chandeliers? And she said, well, but because they don't have any chandeliers, they need something to hang from the ceiling. And I said, that's about as good a reason to start making mobiles again as I could muster. And I tried to get one of the students at Otis to just take some of my designs and make them out of metal, but that didn't go anywhere. The young woman I gave her $100. She didn't do anything, and she was surprised that I wanted the money back. I said, no, just pay it forward. And then I started making mobiles for real, and that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. I think it's 6 or 7, and many of them are figurative. Some of them are not. I very intentionally tried to steer away from anything that looks like good Alex Calder light, which I see a lot of times, mostly in museum shops. So I've tried to do other things. He was great. I love his work, but I don't want to emulate it to the degree that it looks like I'm trying to copy. And I think I've succeeded in that. And it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed working with other artists in the metal shop. And here we are.
Thank you so much. It's fascinating. All right, Diane Schroeder, thank you for waiting. And tell us a little bit about your growing up in Nebraska. And I know you and Mitchell are married, and about your art and what you're doing with your art.
Well, I started painting when I was, I don't know, I think about 10 or 11. And I illustrated a robin sitting on a branch. And my mother said, you should show this to your teacher. So I did, and she basically swooned. And then I started experimenting with all kinds of other materials like colored pencils and watercolor, oil paint, acrylics, and so forth, and kind of zeroed in on oil paint for the most part. When I was in high school, I was allowed to not stay between the lines anymore, so that made for a little bit more of an abstraction in my art, which is what I'm still following today. I went to University of Nebraska for my college, and I decided that I needed to go into interior design to make money, because of course the artists never make money at first. So at the University of Nebraska at that time in the 60s, there wasn't really an interior design program per se. There was an interior design class in the art department, So I kind of created my own criteria or my own curriculum that was interior design and architecture as well as painting. So I had like a triple major. um, during college, one of my interior design instructor took us on a field trip to Chicago, and that's where I decided I needed to be someday. um, so I continued on with interior design and painting at the same time. I've always been a painter, and had a design career from early on in Lincoln for about 4 years, and then I had an opportunity to move to Omaha, Nebraska, much bigger city, and there I was with Leo A. Daly, which is an international architectural firm, and then I got an opportunity to go to HOK in St. Louis, which I did, and found out that Lincoln, Nebraska was much more progressive than St. Louis. So I had to leave St. Louis, and finally I was accepted into a career at GHK in Chicago in 1980, which is where I met Mitchell. And we were working together in interior design and architecture. That was my 3D art career. Um, I always looked at interior design as an art form as opposed to a business form, and that helped me kind of solidify my idea about pursuing my art career. Um, about 15 years ago, I left the design world and decided that it was time for me to be a painter, like I always wanted to be. So I started painting, and I didn't start painting, I continued painting, and decided I had to make it into some kind of a business so that it would sustain myself a little bit. And so I had to figure out how to do my own website. So I did that, taught myself how to do digital photography, and entered into a couple of competitions, one of which was Art Prize in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And there I found I was accepted into a gallery who has been representing me ever since. And now Debbie is representing me, and I'm really very proud to be part of that, as well as several design consultants or art consultants here in Chicago. So that's kind of where I am now. My art is, I characterize it as fictional landscapes, mostly an oil-based painting, which is where I started way back in my early days of high school. And I've added the dimension of collage to that. Um, and with the landscaping, that's been sort of morphed into, I paint a lot that is kind of um, weather scenes. So one of those is a painting that I call Incoming Storm. And there's another one that is a multifaceted canvas. It's like 9 canvases that make up a piece that is called Atmospheric Pressure. So the landscape paintings are, a continuation of what I've been doing actually since I was in my teens, and that's kind of where I am now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Since the topic is you can go home again, let's right now switch to how did your growing up, even if you didn't like living in or that you had a bad experience in Akron, as Jeff explained, how did growing up in the town where you grew up affect your art? Let's just open it up, and whoever wants to talk can talk, and we'll move around the screen.
Well, I'll start. When I was growing up, I think creativity wasn't really part of anybody's vocabulary. So um, I had to kind of overcome a lot of fears and shyness about it because it was just, it's kind of a foreign language. But moving into visual arts was was something that I was bound and determined I was going to do. And it was, I think also I inherited a lot of German background that made me stubborn enough to keep going with it. So um, that's pretty much what has sustained me throughout all of my different careers.
When I was a kid growing up, um, I I won't go so far to say that I was a musical prodigy, but as a kid, as in like at King's School and whatever, I did write music, and I was sort of winning awards at the Akron Scholastic Composers Contest every year, because I was just writing music, and I never sort of really figured out what I would do. I started at The Ohio State University as a music major, but I agree with Diane. It was hard for me to be a creative kid in that environment. And I do think of, or I wonder whether Akron was, as I say, a creative incubator for us. But if it was, I don't think that I got a lot of support. I mean, it was fun to write music and be that kid who wrote music in the fourth grade, but it was I felt like a total outlier, to be honest.
Well,
That's
I had
interesting.
an
Go ahead.
experience of
Let's go with Diane, and then
I,
we'll go down
I
to.
loved my thank you. Oh, thank you, sir. Um, I loved my childhood, and when I go back to Akron now, I just marvel at all the icons that I loved so much, from the red brick roads to the Tudor houses to the park, Sand Run Park. Um, I I love those when I was in the middle of it, and going back, I still love all these icons. Um, but for me, the influence living in Akron had a lot to do with the pop culture and the counterculture that was so present. The fact that, well, we had Goulardi for one, and P.T. Anderson's dad, go figure. But it was really uh, amazing that the British invasion, the music that came over from the UK, was some of their first stops were Akron and Cleveland. And we had WMMS as such a progressive radio station. And so all of this influence, I think, really shaped a lot of my artistic career. I came from an artistic family and was surrounded by all kinds of sewing and crafts and painting and do-it-yourself stuff. My dad put up a trapeze in our backyard at my behest. And then later in life, I'm in my studio and I'm thinking, what is resounding for me? And it was a trapeze. So I started to explore that in my painting, and capturing a moment in time and the relationships of people that are having faith in each other that they're going to get caught in midair and complete this circle of relationship. Um, so I really love Akron, and I don't go back enough. I went back recently in the fall, and stayed at the O'Neill House with some friends of mine and had a great family reunion. And I'm planning on going back again in July for a similar event. And so I didn't have a mentor in Akron artistically. I didn't uh, really avail myself of the Akron Art Institute very much. My mother did. She took classes from Hal Scroggie, who was Dave Scroggie's dad. And so I love that connection. Um, Dave was coming to New York because he was the creative director for Dark Horse Comics, and he would take me to Comic-Con in New York. And then that was the basis of another series of paintings that I started of people doing cosplay. So I have a lot of fingers going off in a lot of directions, but I really relish my roots in Akron and canoeing and Turkey Foot Lake, skiing at Boston Mills, horseback riding at the Circle C Ranch out in Montrose. Anyway, so there you have a little
great.
bit of
Thank you.
background.
Yes. Okay, Mitchell, it's your turn. You're up.
It's kind of a bouncing around balancing act here. My experiences with Akron and connection were really quite favorable and left a strong impression uh, between family life, which did take us out and about to see galleries and events and see things that are being developed, like the Quaker Oats Center, mixed use and redevelopment of old silos that became hotel rooms and hospitality and gathering spaces. So I started to see that there were other opportunities and the balancing of, again, family, you need to work, you need to make a living kind of thing in the back of your head. Um, but there was always some consistency. I mentioned earlier the drums, Lisa and Don Drum. I knew Lisa Drum from Rankin. That's all the way back in my elementary school days, and she and I followed each other, if you will, through the Akron Public Schools, and along the way met her husband. And they're both quite well and recognized artists, not only in that community but on a much larger scale. And there's a number of other connections to Dianne Athey's point of what was going on in Akron. And I think also you graduated from Kent State. There are a number of sculpture pieces on the Kent State campus done by Don Drum, one which has a bullet hole in it, which from May 1970, when the terrible incident happened there, changing times in our lives, it still remains, and there's a hole in one of his sculptures from one of the bullets that, had a bad experience, if you will, relative to those times. So the school encouraged, family encouraged, and they helped me identify a direction. And in my work life, balanced with creative life, um, it was always something that made sense to me that if you could do both, you might find a way to find fulfillment. And really, in doing that, the goal was to do things that made it better for other people. So the environments that we've created, the things that we've designed, products and built environments and branded environments, all of that was with the attitude of where people were going to spend their time, it should be as good as possible. And so that's what became a large scale operation in terms of a design firm and studio that remains in business today and has taken several steps forward. I would encourage the model that Akron had, which were thoughtful, caring art teachers, which is hard to have now these days, be supported, was really instrumental in setting a foundation for me.
Thank you. Debbie, do you want to, do you have another question, or do we need
what I'd like to do is sort of include you in the discussion about music
Sure.
in Akron, which is also pretty
Sure.
significant.
Yeah.
So
I want to make just one other plug for Akron. Two of the world's great basketball players came from Akron. LeBron James and I think Steph Curry didn't grow up there, but he spent time in Akron, and he's fucking amazing watching him play.
Absolutely. Music. Well, I guess I would say music was a huge thing for me, as it was for most of my friends. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I worked at a record store. Everybody worked at a record store that was exactly like High Fidelity. I was playing music all the time and worked in radio stations, so I was kind of hip to some music. So I had a my brother was always listening to the music I was listening to until I started listening to the stuff he was listening to. I was teaching him until he reached a point where he taught me, which is a beautiful thing, because he went from bluegrass music to saxophone. My brother played with was in the band for Tom Waits for about 15 years. Was in Ten Huey, which was part of the Akron Sound, Hammer Damage, Rubber City Rebels, Chai Pig, a bunch of other bands, and my brother's band. And I think Ralph's playing influenced my own son, Patrick, when he started. He and his friends were all in bands in the early 80s, or not in the early mid 90s. I'm sorry, they were all born in the early 80s, but all they wanted to do is play music. And I think a lot of it had to do with Ralph, because Ralph is Patrick's uncle. But I think a lot of the guys that were playing then were influenced by the older musicians, Terry Hind and Bob Kidney and all those guys. So Akron became a very big thing musically for a while. And I think that was a very creative time. And I think it still does resonate for people that live here. We have a new Akron History Center museum. There's a whole section about Akron, the Akron music scene up there. But I think music was a very big part of the arts here and still is.
So on behalf of ArtRep-DG, thank you. Thank you all. Wherever you are, stay warm, stay away from snow, and talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
My pleasure.